Welcome to the Vault of Tales, a treasure trove of science fiction stories. Today, we journey to Nova 3, where a battle-worn human pilot and a radiant alien warrior forge a future beyond war. Their love defies the odds, culminating in the birth of a child, one who carries the light of both species in a power never seen before. As the stars bear witness, their daughter's first cry marks the dawn of a new legacy. Let's get started. The Caliph system burned like a distant ember in the void, a web of planets and space stations orbiting in the flickering glow of ancient stars. From the observation deck of the investigative vessel Aurora, Elias Carver gazed out into the abyss through the radiation-shielded glass, his pale gray eyes reflecting the dim light from the station ahead. His hair had turned silver before its time, not from age, but from years spent under the crushing pressure of superluminal engines and the weight of memories he could never outrun. At 35, Elias was a seasoned pilot investigator of the HumanXAlien, yet his past clung to him like cosmic dust on a ship's hull. Lena, his younger sister, had vanished in an abduction 20 years ago, leaving behind a wound that had never closed. Today was not a day for rest. A new case was igniting across the system. Dozens of children missing, vanishing from interstellar slums, remote mining stations, and densely packed orbital colonies. His grip tightened on the controls as Aurora's engines hummed beneath his hands, guiding the ship toward the docking bay. Elias had no idea this mission would change him forever, not just because of what he would uncover, but because of who he was about to meet. The HFY Central Station loomed in the dark, a colossus of metal and circuitry, its glowing energy conduits pulsing blue against the endless night. Hundreds of smaller vessels darted in and out like a swarm of bees. Inside the strategic operations chamber, the air was heavy, as if the artificial gravity had been doubled. Elias strode in, his black investigative suit clinging to his frame, his boots striking the steel floor with a measured rhythm. Before him, a circular holotable displayed a 3D map of the star system, pulsating red dots marking each disappearance. A man stood beside it, Colonel Vren, a veteran officer with a face like carved stone. His voice carried through the amplified comms. "Carver, you're the best we have, but this time, you're not going in alone. The Alliance is assigning you a Xynari detective." A cold pulse of irritation shot through Elias. Xynari? The alien species with luminescent eyes and the unsettling ability to read emotions through pheromones. He had no interest in working with a mind-probing partner. He preferred logic, intuition, and piloting instinct over whatever mystical tricks they used. Before he could argue, the doors hissed open, and she stepped in. Cyrus was unlike any Xynari Elias had ever seen. She moved with the effortless grace of a phantom, standing nearly his height, her pearlescent skin shimmering like starlight against the void. Her silver-white eyes scanned the room in sharp, calculated sweeps, and her long lavender hair rippled subtly in the artificial air currents. Her form-fitting biosuit, woven from Xynari biofiber, glowed faintly, as if she carried a fragment of the cosmos itself. As she approached the holotable, Elias caught a hint of something, a scent, soft, faint, like rain-soaked grass. He dismissed it instantly. "Detective Cyrus, mission report." Her voice was clear and cutting, sharp as metal against stone. "I've analyzed the initial data. The perpetrator is using an unregistered teleportation gateway to move the children." Elias crossed his arms, his tone cold. "I don't need someone sniffing out my emotions to solve a case. A pilot and a ship are all I need." Cyrus turned, her glowing gaze narrowing slightly. "And I don't need a stubborn human slowing me down. But if you want to save these children, you'll have to put up with me." The tension between them crackled like a ship's power core on the verge of overload. Colonel Vren slammed his hand against the holotable, making the star map flicker. "Enough. You're the only team I have for this. We just intercepted an SOS signal from KAELITH-13. An abandoned station. But this is no ordinary distress call. It's not a transmission, it's a light signal." Elias clenched his jaw. Cyrus remained unreadable. "Get to your ship, now." As they walked toward Aurora, Elias glanced down at his wrist display. The SOS pattern flickered across the screen. But it wasn't Morse code. It wasn't any known distress signal. It pulsed in a slow, deliberate rhythm, a lullaby, a melody from his childhood, a song his mother had once sung to Lena. His chest tightened. This wasn't just a lead. This was a message from the past, crying out across the void. As Aurora disengaged from the station, Elias cast a sidelong glance at Cyrus. She stood beside him, eyes locked on the navigation screen. The starlight reflected in her irises. She could sense something in him. A wound, a scar, a sorrow as vast and silent as the space between the stars. Neither of them realized it yet, but fate had already begun tightening its grip, pulling them toward a mystery far greater than they could ever imagine. The Aurora sliced through the void, its control panel lights flickering across Cyrus' face as she stood silently beside Elias. The SOS signal, woven into the eerie melody of "Hush, Little Baby," still echoed in his mind, a cruel reminder of Lena. His grip on the controls tightened as he guided the ship toward KAELITH-13, a forsaken space station drifting in the abyss. From a distance, the station loomed like a hollow corpse swallowed by the void, twisted metal plating, severed power conduits rusting in silence, and a darkness so absolute it seemed to devour the stars themselves. Elias said nothing as he disengaged the locks and opened the hatch. But Cyrus' silver irises gleamed, scanning the decayed structure like a living radar. Their boots struck the frozen steel floor with muffled thuds, their magnetic soles adjusting to the station's failing artificial gravity. The air was thick with the scent of scorched metal and ancient dust. The stale breath of a place long abandoned. Elias lifted his arm, the wrist-mounted beam cutting through the weightless debris, shards of metal, fractured screens, remnants of some long-forgotten sabotage. Cyrus trailed her fingers over a dust-covered control panel, her eyes faintly glowing as she murmured, "There's something here, and it isn't mechanical." Before Elias could respond, a sharp detonation ruptured the silence. A shockwave rippled through the station as long-dormant power systems groaned awake, sending tremors through the decayed structure. The entrance behind them slammed shut with a hiss of finality, sealing them inside. Outside, the ion storm struck, a violent, unexpected surge of electromagnetic chaos. Bolts of charged particles split the void, howling like a spectral choir trapped in the endless dark. Elias slammed his hand against a nearby console, trying to trigger emergency power, but the screen only flickered red. Power failure. The temperature plummeted instantly, their breath turning to thin plumes of frost. Cyrus instinctively curled in on herself, her pearlescent skin dulling under the cold. "We need to conserve heat," she murmured, her voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs. Elias hesitated, then guided her toward a heat conduit, one of the few that still radiated a weak trace of warmth. They pressed together, separated only by the thin layers of their exosuits and an unspoken tension lingering between them. But the storm outside was more than just noise. It painted hallucinations in the air. Ionized light bled through the station's fractured walls, casting shadows, tall, thin figures shifting and flickering like ghosts against the steel. Elias' breath hitched, his grip on Cyrus' shoulder tightened. "What the hell is that?" he muttered, heart hammering. Cyrus lifted her gaze, her white fire eyes reflecting the eerie glow. Ion storms awaken the echoes of space. She whispered, "They're not real, but they know how to make you believe otherwise." Yet Elias could feel it. She was trembling too, and not just from the cold. The space between them shrank further. Cyrus' breath ghosted over his throat, carrying a faint, earthy scent, something Elias had smelled before. Now sharper, warmer. He turned away, fighting the instinct. But then, she reached out, her fingers pressed against his chest plate. Delicate yet unsteady. "I don't want to die here," she murmured, and for the first time, her voice lacked its usual edge. There was something fragile beneath it. Elias didn't think, he just pulled her closer. Not out of logic, not out of duty, but out of something more primal, something human, and then, it happened. Their contact triggered the latent Zynari ability within her. A wave of pheromonal energy rippled outward, not just scent, but raw emotion, alive and tangible. Elias' mind swayed, images surging through his consciousness. A child, a young Zynari girl with luminous eyes, yanked from Cyrus' arms by faceless shadows. Her cry pierced through his mind, sharp as the storm's wailing. Elias gasped, his eyes snapping open. He met Cyrus' gaze, tears shimmered in her spectral irises. "That was your sister?" His voice was hoarse. She nodded. "I couldn't save her." And in that moment, between the flickering ghosts and the bone-deep cold, they were no longer just reluctant allies. Elias wrapped his arms around her. No words, only warmth and the steady beat of two hearts unwilling to surrender. That night, in the desolate wreck of HFY, something unseen took root, a thread of fate, woven between them, something that would one day burn brighter than the stars themselves. The ion storm had passed, leaving HFY in a chilling, deathly silence, but Elias Carver felt another storm brewing within him, as the aurora sliced through the void, heading back to HFY-9. He gripped the flight controls as if they were the only thing anchoring him to reality. Beside him, Cyrus remained quiet, her silver-white eyes shimmering under the dim glow of the console. That night in the derelict station, the unspoken embrace, the raw pain of her past seeping into him, had planted something in his chest. Something unfamiliar, something both warm and deeply unsettling. He had no way of knowing that the seed of something far greater had already taken root, and was about to explode into reality. They landed at HFY-9's docking bay amid the hum of plasma engines and the distant echoes of station-wide announcements. As Elias stepped out of the Aurora, dust from the abandoned station still clinging to his investigative armor, he stopped short. Cyrus hadn't followed. She stood at the threshold of the ship, arms wrapped around herself, eyes half closed as if listening to something deep within her. "Cyrus," he called, his voice rough. She looked up, and that's when he smelled it, faint at first, like a whisper drifting through the stale air. Lavender, a scent he had only seen described in old Earth archives. Fields of violet stretching endlessly beneath a golden sun, but this was different from the dry, grassy scent he had noticed on her before. This was softer, deeper, a quiet murmur from the cosmos itself. "What is that?" Elias stepped closer, but Cyrus took a step back, her hands trembling slightly. I think I know," she whispered, her voice steady but filled with something unreadable. She inhaled deeply, then met his gaze, her silver irises burning like twin moons. "That night, in the station, when we connected, my body responded, 'I'm pregnant.'" Time fractured. Elias felt his mind go blank, as if the words had sent him spiraling into a black hole. "Pregnant?" he echoed, his voice barely his own. "But that's not, we only..." Cyrus cut him off, stepping closer. The lavender scent thickened, wrapping around him like an invisible thread. "It's the way of the Zynari," she explained, "when we form a deep connection with a mate, not just physical, but emotional, our bodies adapt instantly. That night, your pain, my pain, they intertwined. And now," she pressed a hand against her chest, "now, there's something new." Elias staggered back, his fingers gripping the cold metal of the Aurora for balance. Duty weighed on him like the ruins of a collapsed star. Finding the missing children, dismantling Carvox's trafficking network, but something else settled into his bones now, a tether to Cyrus, to the fragile life neither of them had anticipated. His instincts told him to run, to recoil into the solitude he had always known, but the scent, her scent, held him there, and then he realized something even stranger. It wasn't just a biological signal, it was leading him somewhere. Elias narrowed his eyes, glancing past the docks to the underbelly of HFY-9, the floating slums, where neon flickered against rusted hulls and music pulsed through the stale air like a dying heartbeat. "You smell that?" he muttered. Cyrus nodded slowly. "It's not just a scent, She whispered, "It's a path, a feeling, pulling us forward." She pressed her palm over her heart, where the lavender aroma seemed to grow strongest. "I think it's the children. They're close." Elias followed her gaze into the darkened depths of the station. The scent of lavender was no longer just a symbol of new life. It was a beacon, a thread linking them to the lost souls waiting in the shadows. He took a slow breath, letting the scent settle into his lungs, into his very cells. "Then we follow it," he said, his voice as firm as reinforced steel. "Whatever's happening, we face it together." A faint smile touched Cyrus's lips, but her eyes gleamed with something fiercer, like the birth of a new star. Neither of them knew that the cargo hold full of stolen children was waiting for them in the darkness, or that the scent would lead them deeper than they had ever dared to go. Elias Carver stepped off the docking platform of KAELITH-9. His gaze locked onto the floating slums ahead, a tangled mass of metal adrift between the central stations, where flickering neon lights and the muffled thump of bass reverberated like echoes of an ancient earth. Beside him, Cyrus clenched her fists, the scent of lavender irradiating from her no longer a mere whisper, but a beacon, a silent, invisible map guiding them toward the lost children. "We'll face this together," he had promised, and now, those words pulled them into the underbelly of the station, into the shadows where truths lay buried beneath layers of rust and grime. The slums sprawled before them like a chaotic mosaic, old hovercrafts from the frontier days welded into makeshift housing, suspended by aging power cables that crackled with unstable energy. Fluorescent signs blinked erratically, illuminating narrow alleys where humans, machines, and hybrids alike jostled for space. Scrap metal speakers blared distorted echoes of ancient rock ballads, mixing with drunken laughter and the occasional clatter of metal against metal. Elias kept his stride steady as they passed a memory market, a series of dimly lit stalls offering synthetic recollections through neural implants. The scent of a grandmother's freshly baked bread, the rush of waves against a forgotten shore, fragments of nostalgia, repackaged and sold to the highest bidder. The sight unsettled him. It was like walking through a warped reflection of Earth, familiar yet twisted through the lens of deep space survival. Cyrus moved ahead, her silver-white eyes glimmering as she followed the invisible pheromone trail. "There," she murmured, pointing to a decrepit warehouse, suspended precariously between two derelict cargo freighters. Elias tapped his wrist scanner, a faint biosignal pulsed from within. They approached cautiously, but before Elias could reach for the door, a towering figure emerged from the shadows. One of Carvox's enforcers, the hulking hybrid was part machine, half his face gleaming with polished steel, his right arm ending in a compact laser cannon, the cold glow of his synthetic eye fixed on them, and when he spoke, his voice was a guttural snarl, crackling like a broken speaker. "Wrong place, rats, turn around." Elias didn't hesitate. His instincts as a pilot kicked in. He rolled to the side, diving behind a pile of rusted crates just as the enforcer's cannon flared to life. A streak of red-hot plasma sliced through the air, searing a smoking line across the metal floor where he just stood. "Cyrus, do something," he barked, drawing his own plasma pistol. Cyrus inhaled sharply, her irises igniting with a white-hot glow. She unleashed a pulse of pheromones, not the soft, floral scent from before, but something sharper, laced with raw, unfiltered emotion. The enforcer stiffened, his mechanical arm trembled, his breathing turned erratic. What the hell?" His voice faltered, glitching like a corrupted data file. His cybernetic eye flickered wildly. Elias seized the opening. He lunged forward, firing a single shot. The plasma bolt struck the enforcer's metallic shoulder, sending sparks cascading as the cybernetic limb malfunctioned. With a grunt, the brute staggered back, just as Cyrus delivered a sharp, precise kick to his knee joint, toppling him to the ground with a metallic thud. It was over in seconds. Elias exhaled sharply, but a sharp sting flared up his left arm. He looked down, a deep gash, courtesy of a stray shard of metal during his dive. Blood seeped through his sleeve, dark against the worn fabric. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath, trying to shake off the pain. Cyrus was at his side in an instant, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the wound. "You're hurt," she said, her voice unsteady. The scent of lavender mingled with something sharper now, concern, fear. "I'll live," Elias forced a smirk, though his fingers tightened over the wound. But Cyrus wasn't convinced. Her grip on his arm lingered, her expression unreadable. "We won this fight," he said, glancing down at the disabled enforcer. "But if this is just the beginning, I don't know how much worse things are going to get." Cyrus didn't respond, she only held on a little tighter, as if afraid that, in this place, she might lose him too. Around them, the slums of HFY pulsed with life, music, neon lights, the distant hum of the city's underbelly. But standing there, surrounded by flickering signs and the echoes of forgotten songs, they both knew this was only the start, and the price of victory might be higher than either of them had bargained for. Elias Carver stepped out of the floating slums, his left arm still throbbing from the minor wound, but his gaze never left Cyrus. She stood there, her hand still wrapped tightly around his injury, the familiar scent of lavender now tinged with a sharp, anxious edge. "If we keep going like this, I'm not sure what the future holds for us." His own words hung between them, weightless yet heavy, like cosmic dust caught in the void. They had won their first battle against Carvox's enforcer, but the cost, an unspoken fear in Cyrus's silver eyes, made Elias feel a different kind of pressure. One that tightened around his chest with every step back to KAELITH9. The wound on his arm was the least of his concerns. Cyrus insisted they go straight to the medical bay once Aurora docked. "Not just for you," she said, her voice steady but trembling at the edges. "I need to check something about myself." Elias nodded, though he couldn't shake the unease creeping into his thoughts about the lavender scent, about the cryptic things she had said after that night in the abandoned station. The medical bay of KAELITH9 was a sterile labyrinth of sliding doors and the low hum of machinery. A medical AI, Medic 7, its sleek metal frame polished to a mirror shine, processed their request with the precision of a quantum clock. Elias remained outside, gripping a stress orb while Medic 7 conducted a full bioscan behind a hazy energy field. The scanner beeped rhythmically. Then, silence. Medic 7's lenses flickered a deep cerulean as it spoke. "Detective Cyrus, your biometric data reveals an anomaly. You are carrying a hybrid fetus, human and Xynari." The stress orb slipped from Elias's grasp, bouncing noiselessly on the floor. Cyrus turned toward him, her silver eyes widening, but Medic 7 wasn't finished. The fetus's heartbeat emits a unique frequency, akin to the resonant chimes of ancient Xynari traditions. Furthermore, it exhibits a photonic response anomaly. A holographic display materialized, revealing the minuscule form of the unborn child. From its rhythmic pulse, tiny flares of light flickered, like embers floating in the abyss. Elias swallowed hard. This was more than life. This was a beacon, burning in the void. But the revelation didn't remain a secret for long. The medical AI's internal network had suffered a rare security breach, an unauthorized data leak into the station's internal comms. Within an hour, Elias and Cyrus were summoned to the war room. Colonel Vren stood at the head of the conference table, his gaze as sharp as monoblade steel. Around him, a small council of officers and scientists exchanged glances, curious, wary, calculating. Carver, Cyrus. Vren's voice was the low rumble of an active plasma core. "Confirm this for us. Is it true?" Elias stepped forward, his arm still bandaged, his voice unwavering. "It is, but this is not the Union's concern. This is ours." Cyrus stood beside him, her pearlescent skin paling under the sterile lighting. "I won't deny it," she said, but her voice wavered as the scientists fixated on her, not as a person, but as a specimen. One of them spoke up. "The first viable human Xynari hybrid. This is an evolutionary milestone. We need to study." "No," Cyrus cut in, her eyes flashing with defiance. "I am not some experiment. This is my child, our child. She turned to Elias, searching for something, reassurance, strength, and for the first time, he saw real fear in her. Not fear of death, but of losing something sacred. He placed a firm hand on her shoulder. His next words weren't just a statement, they were a vow. No one is turning you into a test subject. No one is taking our child. I will protect you. Cyrus, both of you. Colonel Vren exhaled, folding his arms. His expression was unreadable. You're in the middle of something bigger than you realize. He said, but for now, you have time, temporary time. Don't let this compromise your mission. As they left the war room, Elias could still see the light from the hologram lingering in his mind, the flickering ember of a heartbeat. Fragile yet defiant against the darkness. Cyrus reached for his hand. Thank you, she whispered. He squeezed her fingers gently. But they both knew this was only the beginning, and the universe was watching, waiting to see if that ember would blaze into fire or be snuffed out. Elias Carver left the strategic meeting room of KAELITH-9 with Cyrus' hand still gripping his. The warmth of her touch the only fire against the cold weight of suspicion and scrutiny from their colleagues. The pressure from within, the looming threat of Cyrus becoming a research subject. The flickering heartbeat of their unborn child like a tiny flame in his mind, only strengthened his resolve. There was no time for hesitation. A final lead from the warehouse in the slums had brought them here, a desolate planet at the edge of the Calith system, where Carvox, the mastermind behind it all, was said to be hiding. As Aurora sliced through space, Elias gazed through the viewport, watching Cyrus beside him. Her silver-white eyes gleamed like beacons in the void. We end this, he said. She nodded, her lavender scent now laced with steel determination. The planet loomed ahead like a scar across the fabric of space, a wasteland of scorched red terrain. Its atmosphere thin enough to require survival suits. When Aurora touched down near a deep ravine, Elias activated the floodlights, their beams cutting through the swirling winds that carried more than dust. They carried something luminous. The air shimmered with bioluminescent particles, drifting like ethereal rivers of light, mesmerizing and deadly. He knew better than to be enchanted by their beauty. The glowing dust could choke their respirators if they weren't careful. Stay sharp, he warned, stepping out onto the hardened ground, the weight of his boots pressing against the planet's barren crust. Relying on the emotional scent trails left behind by Cyrus' pheromones, they followed a tunnel leading underground, a hidden base. Carvox's stronghold. The air was thick with the acrid tang of scorched metal and machine oil. Dim light swaying overhead to reveal a nightmarish sight. Suspended above them, rows upon rows of metal cages hung from the ceiling, each imprisoning a child. Their bodies were frail, their eyes empty, but from each cage, a faint glow pulsed like dying fireflies, life energy being harvested. Drained to power the facility, rage surged through Elias like a tidal wave. Memories of Lena, her lifeless body, stolen future, came crashing back, suffocating him in a storm of fury. We're getting them out, he growled, his hand tightening around the grip of his plasma rifle. Before they could act, the shadows around them shifted. Carvox's enforcers emerged, hybrids of man and machine, their cybernetic eyes burning red, weapons raised in unison. Elias reacted instantly. Cyrus, scramble them, he sprinted back toward the entrance. Activating Aurora's remote command, the ship's thrusters roared, lifting off into the sky. Becoming an irresistible target, the enforcers pivoted, their weapons blazing, plasma fire streaking through the cavern as they pursued the decoy. Explosions rattled the ground as laser bolts struck the hull. Elias smirked. He had sacrificed more ships than he could count in the name of survival. One more wouldn't make a difference. Inside the cavern, Cyrus stood amid the cages, her eyes blazing with intensity. She unleashed a surge of pheromones, not the gentle whispers she had used before, but a storm. Fear, rage, and defiance rippled through the air like a shockwave. The enforcers faltered, clutching their heads as their neural interfaces overloaded, their red optics flickering erratically. Now, she gasped, voice raw from the strain. Elias charged back in, firing 2 precise shots, dropping the last of the struggling hybrids, but the luminous dust from outside had begun seeping into the chamber. Curling through the air in ghostly tendrils, what had once been beautiful was now a silent predator, slipping into the cracks of their suits, threatening to suffocate them. They had the upper hand, for now, but Elias knew Carvox was still out there, lurking in the dark, and the children remained suspended, their lights dimming with each passing second. Cyrus clutched her stomach, where their own fragile flames still burned. "We're not done," Elias said, his voice forged in steel. This planet was barren, lifeless, but the fire inside them was rising, ready to consume anything in its path. The underground cavern trembled, luminous rivers of phosphorescent dust spilled in from the surface, swirling like celestial tides, but Elias Carver had no time to marvel at the sight. He stood in the heart of Carvox's lair, plasma guns searing hot in his grip, his gaze locked onto the suspended cages, each one holding a child, flickering like dying fireflies. Beside him, Cyrus clutched her stomach, breath ragged, her unborn child's faint heartbeat pulsing against her palm. "We're not done yet," he had said, and now, those words led them straight into the inferno of their final battle. A metallic clang echoed from the depths of the cavern. Then, he emerged, Carvox, the interstellar crime lord, the architect of every nightmare Elias and Cyrus had hunted across the void. He was neither man nor machine, but something monstrous in between, a towering hybrid of flesh and gleaming black steel. Twin energy blades burned crimson along his forearms, his eyes glowing an icy blue, devoid of warmth. When he spoke, his voice was a distorted hum, like a broken transmission. "Alliance rats, you really think you can touch me?" Elias tightened his grip on the gun, lips curling into a snarl. "I'm not here to touch you," he growled. "I'm here to end you." The fight ignited like a dying star's final eruption. Elias fired first, blazing streaks of plasma tearing through the air. But Carvox was impossibly fast, his energy blades slicing through the darkness, leaving trails of molten light. A single strike grazed Elias's shoulder, shattering his armor, blood spilling hot down his side. He gritted his teeth, rolling to dodge the next attack, but Carvox had already shifted targets. Cyrus, the bastard, had seen it, seen how she was Elias's breaking point. "No," Elias roared, throwing himself between them. The energy blade drove straight through his chest, a fraction of an inch from his heart. His body convulsed, air forcing itself from his lungs in a ragged gasp. The world tilted. Distantly, he heard Cyrus scream, a sound so raw, so laced with fury, it cut deeper than the wound itself. Then, everything changed. Cyrus's silver eyes burned like twin supernovas. She fell to her knees beside Elias, trembling hands pressing against his wound, but her focus was already shifting, locking onto Carvox, and in that moment, something ancient and primal surged within her. "You will pay for this." Her whisper carried the weight of a dying world. Then, she unleashed, not a mere pulse of pheromones, but a maelstrom, a tidal wave of raw emotion, a storm of agony, terror, and unyielding willpower. It flooded the cavern, crashing into Carvox like an invisible tsunami. The crime lord staggered, his glowing eyes flickered wildly, synthetic systems short-circuiting under the sheer onslaught. "Stop, stop," he howled, hands clawing at his skull as sparks erupted from his body. Wild, panicked, he swung his blade, but his movements had lost precision. His control shattered, his attack missed and instead drove straight into the control panel of his own facility. A catastrophic detonation tore through the lair. The cages, suspended prisons of Carvox's victims, crashed to the floor in a symphony of metal screams. The children inside shuddered, their hollow eyes flickering with something that hadn't been there before. Life. Cyrus acted instantly, dragging Elias away from the collapsing wreckage. Carvox, still twitching, collapsed onto the shattered remains of his empire. But as the last spark sputtered from his broken body, a strange, haunting melody crackled through his failing speakers. Clair de Lune, a melody from Earth, soft, beautiful, inexplicably human. Elias, despite the searing pain in his chest, shuddered at the eerie absurdity of it. This monster, this soulless wretch, meeting his end to one of mankind's most timeless compositions. But Cyrus wasn't listening. She was cradling him now, tears glimmering in her luminescent eyes. "Don't leave me," she pleaded, voice breaking. Blood dripped between Elias's fingers, staining the ground, but he forced a smile. "I'm not going anywhere." The freed children gathered around them, their tiny faces illuminated by the fading glow of Cyrus's unborn child, an ember of hope flickering in the abyss. The cavern trembled one last time. Carvox's stronghold was falling. Phosphorescent dust from the surface poured in like an ethereal mist. Swirling through the ruins, somewhere in the distance, Claire de Lune faded into silence. Cyrus held Elias tighter, refusing to let go. They had saved the children. They had slain the monster. But at what cost? Their fire had burned brighter than ever before. But would it survive the encroaching darkness? The cavern trembled one last time as Carvox's systems collapsed, sending cascades of luminescent dust swirling through the air, blending with the fading notes of Claire de Lune. Elias Carver lay in Cyrus's arms, blood seeping through shattered armor, his breaths as faint as the whisper of wind across the barren planet. She clutched him tightly, silver-white eyes glistening with desperation. "Don't leave me," but the fire within him, and within her, had not yet gone out. The rescued children gathered around them, their hollow gazes slowly brightening as they beheld the tiny pulse of light within Cyrus, the heartbeat of the unborn child she carried. In the ruins of darkness, a single spark of hope flickered to life, and sometimes that was all one needed to keep going. The rescue ship arrived moments later, its floodlights piercing through the phosphorescent haze. Carrying medics and survival equipment, Elias was lifted onto a floating stretcher, unmoving, yet Cyrus never left his side. Aboard the evac ship, she remained by him in the medical bay, fingers wrapped tightly around his as the MEDIX-7, an advanced bio-repair unit, deployed a swarm of nano-healers into his bloodstream. The marvels of Alien's medicine were as close to miracles as science allowed, microscopic machines weaving through muscle fibers, sealing torn flesh, while an oxygen conduit sustained his failing lungs. Cyrus never looked away from the holographic monitor, where his heartbeat, weak but steady, pulsed in rhythm with the faint glow within her. Two small flames, burning against the void. The day Elias opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was her, Cyrus, bathed in soft medical lighting, her pearl-like skin glowing with an ethereal radiance. "You haven't slept," he rasped, his voice rough but warm. She smiled, the scent of lavender lingering around her, soothing him like a quiet lullaby. "I couldn't," she whispered, "not until you woke up." He reached for her hand, feeling the quiet strength in her grip. They had survived the darkness together. Back on KAELITH-9, they stood before Colonel Vren and the Alliance Council, delivering their report. Elias, still bandaged but unyielding, spoke with the iron resolve of a battle-hardened soldier. "Carvox is dead, the children are safe," Cyrus added, her silver eyes shining with certainty. "We succeeded because we believed in each other." Their story, of a fateful night aboard an abandoned station, of a battle fought beneath the earth, spread like a shockwave across the sector. The council saw an opportunity, a human pilot and a Xynari investigator, bound by battle, carrying the first hybrid child between their species, a symbol of unity, of the future. Colonel Vren made it official. "We will announce the birth of this child as a step forward in interspecies diplomacy. This is the future of the Alliance." But Elias and Cyrus didn't care about politics. As they left the meeting, Elias pulled her aside into a quiet corridor, where the vastness of space stretched beyond the reinforced glass. Stars shimmered in the abyss. "I don't want glory," he murmured, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "I just want a family. You, and the baby." Cyrus nodded, tears brimming but her smile radiant. "That's all I want, too," she whispered. They made their decision that night. No more battlefields, No more dangerous assignments. They would step away from war, find a quiet place, and build a future together, a small home on a civilian station, where their fire could burn peacefully, undisturbed. But something strange began to happen with the children they had saved. During their interviews with social workers, many described the same dream, a guiding little flame that led them out of the darkness. Warm and gentle, pulling them away from their fear. A small girl with tangled braids hesitated before Cyrus, then whispered, "It was like your light." Cyrus shivered, a hand instinctively pressing against her stomach. The child inside her, not yet born, had somehow reached out to those lost souls. Elias overheard, a slow smile forming despite the ache in his ribs. "It's stronger than either of us," he murmured, and for the first time, when he thought of Lena, her memory was not a wound, but a reason to move forward. As they boarded the transport ship, Elias cast one last glance through the viewport. Far in the distance, the rivers of luminous dust still shimmered over the ruined planet, flowing like veins of light through the darkness. The storm had passed, but the fire they had kindled still burned within him, within Cyrus, and within the tiny heartbeat yet to come. The universe was vast, cold, and unforgiving, but tonight, humanity and the Xynari had proven that even in the deepest void, hope could still shine. Elias Carver stood on the deck of the departing ship, watching the rivers of light from KAELITH-9 fade into the abyss beyond the window. Beside him, Cyrus held his hand, the soft scent of lavender lingering between them, an unspoken promise of peace. They had survived the storm, Carvox, the underground fortress, even the doubts of the Aliens, only to find hope in the quiet flicker of life yet to be born. As the civilian transport carried them toward their new station, Elias felt something rare, relief. The battlefield was behind them. Now, it was time to build. Cyrus rested her head against his shoulder and murmured, "We should do something to mark this beginning." He smiled, nodding. "A wedding," he said, and her silver-white eyes shimmered like twin stars. Nova 3 was nothing like KAELITH-9. Smaller, quieter, its narrow corridors lined with panoramic windows gazing out into the endless night. Elias and Cyrus chose a small observation deck for their ceremony. No grand halls, no elaborate rituals, just those who truly mattered. The children they had saved from Carvox's prison stood in neat rows, their eyes bright as they wore clean clothes for the first time in months. A handful of close comrades from the investigative team, Jessa, the engineer who had patched up the Aurora more times than anyone could count, and even Colonel Vren, who arrived with a rare smile, were there as well. The air was filled with hushed conversations and quiet laughter, a simple symphony beneath the stars. Then Cyrus entered, and Elias nearly forgot to breathe. She wasn't wearing armor, nor the practical gear of a Xynari operative. Instead, she wore a traditional Xynari ceremonial robe, woven from biosynthetic fibers that shimmered like a living nebula. Light danced across its surface in shifting hues of violet, deep blue, and silver, as if she carried a galaxy upon her skin. Her luminous white eyes gleamed, and her lavender-hued hair swayed gently in the station's artificial airflow. Elias, in contrast, was far simpler. He wore his old pilot's uniform, worn but familiar, though a single detail made all the difference. On his finger rested a ring, crafted from a fragment of the Aurora's hull, the very ship that had carried them through fire and darkness. He ran a thumb over its surface, feeling the weight of all they had endured, and smiled as she stepped beside him. There was no priest, no formal officiant. Instead, Jessa stood between them, speaking through a small comm speaker. "Elias Carver and Cyrus of Xynari," she announced, grinning. "You have fought together, survived together, and now, you choose to stand together. Anything you'd like to say?" Elias took Cyrus's hands, his voice steady but deep with emotion. "I'm not a man of grand speeches, but she's the fire that kept me alive. And I'll protect her, to the end of the universe." Cyrus smiled, silver tears glistening in her eyes. "You are my strength," she whispered, "and I have found my home in you." Then, the moment of surprise, the engineers had prepared something special, a gift orchestrated by Jessa herself. As Elias and Cyrus exchanged their vows, a soft explosion echoed beyond the observation window. Heads turned, and then, the void came alive, a meteor shower of brilliant white, gold, and crimson streaked across the darkness, each trail burning like a celestial firework. But it wasn't just a display. Jessa laughed as she explained, "We repurposed orbital debris, compressed it into ignitable particles and launched them into the exosphere. A wedding gift that cleans up space and looks damn good." Elias chuckled, a warmth spreading through him. Humanity, practical, resourceful, and utterly ridiculous, had turned discarded metal into something beautiful. The children gasped in wonder, their cheers echoing through the chamber. One boy, the same one who once spoke of the small flame in his dreams, ran to Cyrus. Wrapping his arms around her waist, "You look like a star," he whispered in awe. She knelt, brushing his tangled hair gently. "You are a star too, little one," she murmured. Elias watched them, his heart full, under the falling light of artificial meteors. He pulled Cyrus into his arms and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. Applause filled the room, but in his mind, there was only her and the universe around them. A quiet, infinite moment, proving that despite their differences, human and Xynari, pilot and detective, they had found a way to ignite the darkness together. As the last streaks of light faded into the void, Elias looked out through the observation window. The final embers flickered, a silent reminder. This was not an ending, but a beginning. Their new light had been kindled, and it would never go out. The artificial meteor shower outside Nova 3's observation deck slowly faded, the last streaks of light shimmering like a silent promise of a new beginning. Elias Carver held Cyrus close, feeling her warmth against him, the bioluminescent fabric of her Xynari attire glowing softly like a fragment of the cosmos. Their modest wedding had marked a turning point, not another battlefield, not another mission, but something far greater, a family, a light they had kindled together in the vastness of space. As their guests departed, laughter from the children they had rescued still echoed in Elias's mind. That fire of hope wasn't just for them alone. Time passed like a river of light flowing across distant planets. And soon, that fire would ignite into something even greater, something truly alive. Months later, aboard NOVA 3, Cyrus lay in the station's family medical bay, a small but warm space. Its glass walls revealing the endless expanse of the stars. Elias sat beside her, his fingers interlaced with hers, the steady beeping of the Medic 7 scanner filling the room. The scent of lavender surrounded them, richer now, deeper, as if life itself had taken root in its fragrance. Cyrus's breath came in uneven gasps, silver-white eyes glistening with sweat, yet she smiled, unwavering. "It's almost time," she whispered. Elias squeezed her hand, his heart pounding like a plasma drive at full burn. And then, the moment arrived, a cry, small yet resounding, clear as a chime from an ancient Xynari temple. Medic 7's mechanical arms moved with precision, lifting the newborn with gentle care. A girl, tiny yet radiant, her silver-white eyes gleamed like twin newborn stars, but her hair, soft, luminous, and dusted with stardust like silver, was undeniably his. Elias stared, his pulse hammering, when Cyrus reached out, cradling their child. A soft wave of sound pulsed through the air. It wasn't a typical cry, it was something else. Something that resonated, that soothed, like a breeze from a world long lost, carrying the echoes of warmth and home. A hybrid gift, Medic 7 remarked, a rare note of intrigue in its eye-infused voice. Emotional resonance waves, an inherited trait from both human and Xynari genetics. Elias exhaled a shaky laugh, his vision blurring. "She's stronger than both of us," he murmured. They named her Lumen, light, a name Elias had chosen the moment he looked into those silver eyes. "It's perfect," Cyrus whispered, holding Lumen against her chest, her pearl-like skin glowing softly where mother and daughter touched. Elias sat beside them, running a hand through Lumen's delicate silver hair, feeling the warmth of the fragile life they had created together. Memories surged. KAELITH9, the war against Carvox, the children's dreams of a small flame, all of it leading here. Lumen was the flame they had sparked, now burning bright in the form of a child. Time flowed like the stars outside Nova 3's glass corridors, and Lumen grew beneath their watchful eyes. The station became her playground, its endless hallways illuminated by the cosmic glow beyond. One day, Elias retrieved something from an old storage crate, a relic from his past. A small lantern, a compact metal frame, salvaged from the wreckage of Aurora before it was decommissioned. Inside, a miniature plasma core flickered, casting a tiny, dancing flame, an ember from the days when he had been a pilot. A soldier! Lumen was mesmerized. Her silver eyes widened in fascination as she flicked the switch, watching the ember come to life. Every time she played with it, a soft resonance hummed through the air, her unique ability calming even the most weary souls on the station. Cyrus, watching from the corner of the room, turned to Elias with a knowing smile. "She's just like you," she said softly, bringing light to the dark. Elias sat on the lounge chair in their small quarters, gazing at his wife and daughter as they played beneath the vast window of the station. Beyond them, the universe stretched into infinity, cold, mysterious, yet no longer terrifying. He thought of the doubts he had carried, the scars of war, the pain of losing Lena. And now, looking at his family, he smiled, not the weary smirk of a battle-hardened soldier, but the quiet, contented smile of a father, of a husband. Lumen turned, reaching her tiny hands toward him. He lifted her effortlessly, placing her atop his shoulders. "You are my light," he murmured, and her laughter, pure, untainted, filled the room, resonating like a song woven from the stars themselves. The flame of hope they had kindled in the darkness had now become a new fire, one that would never fade. Elias knew, no matter how the Caliph system changed, no matter how many stars dimmed and died, Lumen's light, the light of humanity and Zynari, would never be extinguished. The small lantern on the table flickered, its tiny plasma flame dancing, a quiet reminder that from the ashes of war, they had built something lasting, a family, a future, a legacy that would burn eternal.